afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to another Pineapple Bytes video training session. In this video training session, we'll be doing a presentation on how should my Aloha POS network be wired. The POS network is probably the biggest cause of issues that can arise with a point of sale type system. I've always said, and I will always say, that your network infrastructure that you have in your restaurant, bar, or business is the most vital piece of the puzzle for keeping a point of sale stable and working correctly. If your wiring in your building is old, or it was never maintained, or it's not labeled, or it's not clean, you're going to have a lot of issues with your point of sale system. You'll have issues with communication, weird things will happen, your terminals or point of sale devices will drop offline. And then on top of that, when it comes to troubleshooting the issues, you're going to have a hard time following cables because they'll be all messy. You'll have a hard time identifying what cable goes where, what is used to connect what device to what. So the biggest thing that you should be concerned about is how your Aloha point of sale is networked together and how the wiring is done in your building. So we'll go over two slides in this presentation. The first slide will review what the ideal setup of a Aloha POS network should be, and then kind of what a not ideal situation would be for a point of sale network. So the first slide here will show is the ideal network layout for POS devices. And first we're going to start off with an NCR POS terminal or network device. Then it's going to have a patch cable, little network patch cable, that's then going to connect it to a network wall jack. I always recommend having network wall jacks done for each device. That way you don't have a cable that's kind of just laying out in the open, dangling from the ceiling. When you're using jacks, the cable's behind the wall. It's customers can't see it. It's aesthetically pleasing. The network wall jacks can be labeled, so it's easily identify what goes to where. It's just way cleaner than having just direct lines. So then from that network wall jack, it's got to run behind the jack. There's a wire that's got to run up through the ceiling or wherever it goes back to what's called a network patch panel. And now a network patch panel I strongly recommend having because it gets put into what's called the network rack and generally is screwed into the wall in a network wiring closet or back in a separate office, or maybe the office where the Aloha back office computer is. But it's generally will be up out of the way on the wall, can be labeled exactly what port goes where. So if you're trying to identify which cables, you can know exactly, okay, this wall jack goes to this port on this network patch panel. And that's a lot more aesthetically pleasing than having 20 cables dangling from the ceiling in your office that are just plugging into a router or a switch. It's very tidy to put them through a patch panel. So then from each port on this patch panel, it's got to have another network patch cable that's then going to plug into your point of sale network switch. Point of sale network switch is going to have another patch cable that links it to the point of sale router. So you can see here kind of one straight long run of communication directly from your point of sale device right to the POS router. The point of sale network switch and the point of sale network router, if those can be put into that network rack, I strongly recommend that as well. So you can put everything in one place. Then you can use small cables to link the devices together instead of having to use longer cables. If you can't put the switch or the router in the rack, try the wall mount them if you can, which just basically keeps everything nice and tidy. It's off the floor. It's off of any desk that it may have a chance to be hit or kicked or the power unplugged from it by mistake or things put on top of it. If you can't wall mount it, try to build a shelf that you can put on the wall, and you can put these devices on the shelf. You just want to make sure that the switch and the rotor are kind of out of the way. They're in a nice secure spot where they're not going to be fiddled with. From there, of course, you're going to want to make sure you have your essential pieces of gear backed up by UPS battery backup. So you're going to want to make sure that your POS terminal or network device is behind a UPS battery backup, as well as your POS network switch and your POS network router. You're going to want to make sure all of those devices have their own UPS battery backup, so they're protected by surges that might come through brownouts, power outages. It will keep them powered on, so you have a chance to shut things down correctly. Just really important to have those things protected. And then on top of that, labeling is key when dealing with any type of network. If someone is coming in and redoing your wiring, or you're getting wiring done from scratch, make sure the person who does the wiring labels everything they possibly can. This is going to help you down the road when you have to do network troubleshooting, and it's going to help every single person that comes in after the fact know exactly, okay, what goes where. It's going to make it way easier to troubleshoot, and yeah, just a lot more efficient. So you're going to want to make sure that you always label things when you're dealing with a network. The key things that you need to make sure that are labeled are the ports on the network patch panel, along with the network wall jack. So you're going to want to make sure the jack's labeled, and then you're going to want to make sure the port is labeled out here. So generally someone would label this like A1, and then in the back it would have A1 as well, so you know exactly, okay, this A1 port goes out to terminal number 1 in my point of sale. So you know if you're having issues with communication, you know exactly what you're dealing with and where it's located, and you don't have to go sorting through a whole mess of wires to try to figure out, okay, what wire actually controls the communication with this terminal. Makes it very easy. So this type of setup is what we call basically a home run setup. It's basically saying that you have a dedicated run coming right from your network patch panel right out to each device. There's no separate network switches installed anywhere. It's just a straight run right to that device. This is the ideal solution for setting up your point of sale network, and we highly recommend having it done this way. The second way that is kind of not ideal, and you want to try to avoid this at all costs if you can, it is possible to do, but we recommend having the home runs done, is it kind of starts out the exact same way. You got your NCR POS terminal network device. It's using a patched cable, but now instead of plugging right into the wall jack, it's going into a POS network switch. That network switch is then having a cable that then goes into the wall jack. That wall jack goes through the wall, goes back to the network patch panel, then has a cable from the patch panel that goes into the switch. The switch then connects to the router with another patch panel. So everything's the exact same, except now you've introduced another POS network switch. What generally happens and why this type of network shows up a lot in businesses is third-party companies like credit card providers or somebody else, cable or internet providers or satellite radio people will come in and they'll have a device that needs an internet connection or a network connection. And instead of getting a wiring company to come in and run another home run cable from your patch panel to their device, they'll simply jam in another POS network switch at the location of the point of sale terminal or wherever there's already a connection coming out from the patch panel. And then they'll jack their device into that switch. Basically what this does is it just now is kind of making an extension. So you're kind of branching off that one line that you have is now branching off the two separate devices. When you do this, you add in another point of failure. So if you ever have a power outage or something like that, this POS network switch could go offline. Therefore, anything connected to that point of sale switch is not going to communicate correctly to everything else that's on the network. We've also seen where if there's power outages, those switches can get locked up. You have to power cycle them to get them to work again. Those POS network switches generally aren't installed in correct locations. They'll be jammed in at a bar, sitting on top of the bar where there's alcohol, there's liquid. They'll be plugged in somewhere where the power plug can easily come unplugged by mistake if someone's moving stuff around. They'll get jammed under counters. We've seen them jammed down beside dishwashers, or they fall behind a cabinet somewhere. And then there's hours upon hours spent troubleshooting over the phone, trying to figure out why is this POS terminal not communicating with the rest of them. only to find out that there was a switch that fell behind a cupboard somewhere that either went bad or the power came out or the network cable came out of it, that 3/4 of the people in the business didn't even know that was there. So we always want to recommend avoiding putting in POS network switches where you don't have to, having home runs done for each. So you can see here, just it shows that another point of failure. So if something does go wrong with that device, you're basically breaking the chain of communication. And then anything plugged into this network switch is now no longer going to able to communicate with the rest of your point of sale network. So you want to avoid that at all costs. You don't want to end up with something like this. So you want to always want to make sure you have a patch panel instead of this in your wiring closet. If you don't have a patch panel, this is generally what it will look like. You'll go into a wiring closet and you'll have a whole bunch of wires dropped from the ceilings with ends put on them. They won't be labeled. You don't know where they go. It's just very, very confusing. What you want to do is you want to end up with something like this. So this is a nice setup. You can see they have their rack here. It's probably wall mounted. They got their network patch panel here. They have a rack mounted switch and a rack mounted rotor. And they kind of have everything nice and tidy, all clean, all labeled, very, very organized, out of the way. This type of setup will prevent you from having probably any issues with your point of sale that are related to network issues, and it will make it very easy to troubleshoot going down the road. Hopefully this video was informative for you, and have a great day.